What's going on, Cloud Scholars? I hope your day is going well. My name is Kieran Tross, and I'm your host for today's video. I'm really excited to be back here with you all. I took some weeks off, almost a month, studying for my Google Certified Associate Engineer exam, and I passed. So I'm back here making another video for you, which is we're talking today about Azure Logging. So it's a two-part video, and basically the first part is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to introduce the concept of Azure Logging. Then I'm going to talk to you why it's important to log your logs. And then we're going to get into a point of we're talking about the approach to Azure Logging as well. That's the first part of the video where I'm going to have a couple of PowerPoint slides, but don't worry, I won't overburden you with them. The second part of the video is where I say, okay, this is how we do it. We get in front of the Azure portal and we're really showing you exactly what needs to get done to keep and contain your logs. So I'm going to show you exactly where you go for your logs and your diagnostic settings, but I'm also going to go into and show you exactly how do you enforce it from an automatic point of view. So using Azure Policies, and I'm going to talk about the different policies you can apply in your environment. So without further ado, let's stop talking, roll up the sleeves, and let's get started. Okay, so let's start off with talking about what are Azure logs. So Azure logs are records of events and activities that occur within the Azure ecosystem. They capture the information about Azure resources such as virtual machines, storage accounts, and networking components, as well as applications running on these resources. So think of Azure logs no different than you would as your computer logs. You want to really get historical data. You want to see exactly what's going on, what was being created, by who, who's been on the computer, things of that nature. And it's really essential to get these logs because there's a number of different reasons why you want to keep them. So let's talk a little bit about why you're using Azure Logging and why you want to keep this information. So first, let's talk about troubleshooting and debugging. If you have an issue going on with a virtual machine or any other service, the logs are going to tell you what's going on, right? That's one of the places you're going to look and say, okay, let me see what the logs are saying. Logs are telling you, hey, system was working at 8:55, system was working at 8:56, system stopped working at 8:57. So you're going to say, okay, what caused it? What was the things going on there? You look at the logs, you can see some error message of why, if it was a hardware failure, so on and so forth. Security. You're definitely going to want to need to keep the logs because you want to see who is going on. So let's take network logs, right? Network traffic. You can get your network security logs from like Network Watcher within Azure. And you will want to make sure that you're being able to see all this stuff because it will let you know exactly the IP address, where it's coming from. It will let you know exactly if there was any parallel movement, all that other stuff. So if you do get compromised, right, that's a security reason why you want to keep those logs. Another thing is performance and optimization. I kind of talked about this a little bit with the troubleshooting and debugging portion, where you have a application, a web app, and you want to say, hey, you're starting to get issues, and customers are calling and saying, hey, the website's moving really slow. I can't make purchases, so on and so forth. That is going to cost you money, and then what they're going to end up doing is saying, I can't deal with you, I'm going to go to a competitor. So you want to look at the performance and optimization because those logs will let you know, hey, I need to scale up or scale down my resources. And then also capacity, same thing that goes into performance. Capacity is letting you know, hey, where are we at with our threshold? And do I need to, start using another storage account? What's going on within my environment? So these are some of the reasons why you're going to use Azure Logging, but there's so much more. You also got to think of compliance as well and risk, because with logging, you have to keep these things to stay within that governance, right? So whatever, if you work in healthcare, it's HIPAA. You could be in any other field, it doesn't really matter. You're going to want to make sure you stay within compliance. So let's talk a little bit about the different type of logs. So there's three type of platform logs within Azure. So there's resource logs, which is also known as diagnostic logs. Then you have your activity logs, right? Your activity logs, as you see there, it's, use the activity logs to determine what, who, and when for any write operations taken on a resource within your subscription. And then you also have your Azure Active Directory logs. Now, some of you may be saying, hey, I know there's more logs than that, but if you're thinking it from a hierarchy standpoint, these are the three major logs, and then you have logs within that. So in your Active Directory, there's tons of other logs that you can pull from that sign-in log. Even if in your activity logs, there's tons of logs that you can get, and then there's resource logs as well. So this is a screenshot, and I pulled this from the Microsoft website, and I'm going to actually put a link to it within the description of this video. So here we got our resource logs, activity logs, and Azure Active Directory logs, and you can see that you have a number of options for where you want to send those logs. Now, by default, Microsoft's going to keep that for 90 days. Anything after that is just not going to be kept. So you need to figure out, okay, how is your log scheme going to be? Are you going to put those in a log analytics workspace? Are you going to put it in a storage account? Are you going to put it in an event hub and then send that off to another repository, maybe a SIM that you are using within your company? That's entirely up to you. Now, when it comes to Microsoft logs, as you can see right here, I'm in the Azure portal right now. I'm in the all section, and you can see there is a ton of different services here that you can use. You've got your virtual machines, you have a function app, you have your Kubernetes services. There's a lot of different things here. So, for an architect or engineer or someone that is just, responsibility, if your domain is to manage the Azure environment and you're looking at this page and you're like, hey, how do I manage all my resources in here? It can get very complicated really quickly, and not even just that, it could be a bit overwhelming. So you've definitely reached the right video to just talk to you about, before we even go into the Azure logs and what you can do with them and where to put them and all this other stuff, I really want to talk a little bit about the approach to Azure Logging. So what is the right approach to Azure Logging? Right? How do we go about saying, okay, this is our schema for our logs? So right here, I have a quick workflow diagram that is something that can help you out when you're thinking about, all right, we need to map this out within our environment, and we need to figure out how we're going to go about doing these logs and enforce them in the right way that it's all in uniform, right? You don't want one architect doing something and another architect doing something else, or an engineer, or whatever you're calling the IT personnel in your organization. You want to make sure that everybody is following the same steps. So we go to the top left-hand corner. We're going to go to where we start off, and where we have virtual machine scale set, you can put any service, Azure service, in that same field, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a virtual machine scale set, if it's a Azure storage account, if it's a Kubernetes, you can use that for anything. This is literally just a template about how you should really approach logging within your environment. So then once you say, okay, you have this specific device, right, this specific service that you're using, then you're going to go down and say, okay, is there a policy defined? So what I will say to you is this. At this point in the video, I'm assuming that you know a little bit about Azure Policies. If you do not know about Azure Policies, I do have another video where I go into detail and I introduce Azure Policies, and I will be putting a link to that as well in this video. But if you do know it, then great, we can continue working and talking along. But if anybody else, then watch that video. It will definitely help you out. But I'm going to go into using Azure Policies to enforce logs. So if you don't have a policy for that specific service within your Azure environment, then you want to take a look and look at the different options that you have. So one, you can use a built-in policy. There are built-in policies that will work for you, but sometimes they may not be any built-in policy, where you would have to now create a custom policy to help you out and enforce whatever rules you want to enforce within your environment. And then finally, you can do a policy initiative. A policy initiative is basically a policy on steroids. So it is a bunch of different policies that you tie together and you apply it to whether the resource group or subscription. Now, it's important about how you set up your resource groups, because this way you can now manage it the right way. So you can also do a policy initiative, and we will talk more in depth later on in the video about how that gets done. Once you are able to say, okay, I have a defined policy in place for specific Azure resource, in our case, we're talking about virtual machine scale sets, then you're going to say, okay, where does this go, right? So is it the diagnostic settings? And you can see right here, we have our policy, which is letting us know, okay, for this resource, we have the diagnostic settings and we have our different options of where we're sending it to. So you can do storage accounts, you could do log analytic workspaces, you can do event hubs. And also, if you wanted to keep it within Azure, you can also do certain stuff within Azure Monitor as well. So, that's more for activity logs and stuff like that. But that gives you an overview of how you're able to see what's going on with your system and how you're working. So, enough with the PowerPoint deck. I did promise you all that I'm just going to go over PowerPoint with you just a little bit, but I really want to focus more on the portal. So let's jump into it.